Hey, what's up? This is May 8th, 2016. This is the voice of a guy whose first name is Eisel, his last name is Mazar. You probably know me from my YouTube channel, which is called à-bas-le-ciel. Mike asks, could you discuss what you have found are the pieces necessary for a movement to have success? You have talked about things that won't work on their own, and you have talked about how political influence at all levels is important. But can political influence create success on its own? What are the critical parts? Okay, close quote, end of question. So obviously this could be a 1-hour monologue in response to this, given my background and my interest in life. To give a somewhat limited reflection in just 2 parts. One, the most successful political movements are the most invisible. So in this I mentioned, in a recent video, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. The campaigns to address and indeed demonize, drunk driving. Like scientifically, it's actually possible for a person to drink alcohol and drive a car in a completely responsible and safe way. Politically, that's an inconvenient fact, but we have set up laws that make it completely illegal for anyone to drink alcohol and drive a car. And I agree with that. I mean, that's the only way you have to have a law that applies to everyone equally. You can't have a law that says, well, if you're really good at driving drunk, we'll let you do it. But, over a period of decades, the crusades against drunk driving and the crusades to really kind of limit the culture of alcohol have been very, very successful. And they're also largely invisible. Now, at the opposite extreme, another example I talked about in a recent video was the question of the conspiracy for who killed JFK. This type of conspiratorial movement for political change. And, of course, lobbies that are paid for by industries, what have you. There are many political movements that in this sense also are invisible. Why do I mention this? Well, for one thing, the success of Mothers Against Drunk Driving is not unique. They don't have any special advantages. Their methods and their successes can be reproduced, can be imitated, can be learned from. And by contrast, some vegans want to draw attention to the abolition of slavery, specifically the abolition of slavery in Georgia, in the United States, in the southern United States. And many aspects of that are unique and cannot be reproduced. The liberation of slaves in Haiti, fascinating history that I myself have read a great deal about. But there's no way I can say, oh yeah, look at the situation for slaves in Haiti several hundred years ago, and now obviously we can just apply these lessons to Canada in 2016. No, you have to be able to recognize when something is comparable, when it's reproducible, when it is something you can generalize about, and when really it's quite unique. Now, in Haiti, the revolution that freed the slaves involved real violence of the most gruesome kind, of course, including tremendous violence by the white people on behalf of the slave owners. But the slaves themselves, it was said at the time, and not without reason, the flag of the revolution was of a white baby impaled on a spike, because the slaves would kill the slave masters, and they would routinely take a spear and murder the babies, murder the infants of the slave masters, and then march to the next town with a spear with a dead baby at the end of it. Now, I mention this it's an incredibly gory chapter of history, but let's keep it real. When other vegans talk about using slavery, the abolition of slavery as a model for social change for veganism, is that really what you're talking about? I don't think so. I don't think at all we're really talking about a situation where you want to emulate that type of violent social change. And now, obviously, most people who really study that history, they have mixed sympathies because, of course, slavery is bad. They want to see slavery end, but they understand why the extreme violence happened. It's tragic. But learning from that tragedy and what lessons you apply now, especially in a democratic society where you can go to City Hall, you can collect donations and hire a lawyer and challenge these things in a court of law. The slaves in Haiti couldn't do that. When there are so many politicians open to us, that's really worth challenging. Again, whether you look at Mothers Against Drunk Driving or any other, again, campaigns against smoking cigarettes to reform labeling and health standards for cigarettes, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the most successful, and they're also the most invisible. And the culture of complaint is not really the culture you want to be imitating. Although, again, as I've said earlier in this same podcast, I do have sympathy with the social reasons for why people want to organize rallies and protests, and I don't regard them as completely worthless. Coming back to Mike's question here, part 2, the second aspect I wanted to mention. If you're really asking the question, what is the critical aspect? The critical aspect is money. Okay, the critical issue is economic. Why is PETA the most powerful voice for veganism in the world today? People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Not because they're smart, not because they're right, not because they're good at what they do, because they got money. Okay, they pay wages. They employ people. All right? I hear a lot of BS about being a full-time activist on the internet. The employees of PETA are probably the only full-time vegan activists in the world. They're the majority of them. How many vegan agencies can you say employ people? Now, you guys know, if you watch my channel, I don't like PETA. There are a lot of things I dislike about them. I think they're kind of dumb and they're kind of goofy, and they've been on the wrong side of history on a number of different issues. It's not perfect. Most vegans, of course, hate them because they kill stray animals, or they hate them because they have posters with naked women in them, etc., etc. But guess what? At the end of the day, money talks. You can refer to the first or the second question I answered, where I talked about the fact that I deeply disagree with this, that in a democratic society, freedom of speech should not be based on the ability to pay. But in answer to this question, that is the answer. Now, you've heard me say on YouTube, I had this experience with the Green Party in Canada. I could also talk about my experience with Buddhism. Both of those examples, what really mattered was motivating elderly people to support you. So if you have highly motivated retired people older than 65, who are giving you $100 a month, so there could be elderly Chinese people who give money to a Buddhist temple, could be elderly white people who give money to the Green Party, whatever. That forms the economic basis for a successful political movement. That is the brutal, ugly truth nobody else is going to tell you, Mike. Yes, the foundation for a successful political movement is financial. And the foundation for those finances, in my opinion, is transparency and accountability. Right? And transparency does not mean democracy. So, those Chinese people, when they donate their money to the Buddhist temple, they may have no control over what happens to that money. They don't get to vote. They don't get a referendum. They don't even get a debate or discussion. But what they will get, if it's a good Buddhist temple, is a report telling them what happened to the money. And then, of course, they can decide in the next year if they want to donate again or not. They might cancel their donation. So, okay, so much money went into repainting the roof, so much money did this, so much money did that. And, it may be, of course, that some of the money is being spent to take care of orphans, to give food to starving people. Actually, some Buddhist temples do animal rights stuff also, to liberate animals from cages and this kind of thing. That's another story. That could be a 1-hour discussion right there. But, you add it all up and you give them a list. And even in the complete absence of democracy, that can be a very powerful and meaningful thing. That's the complete answer to your question for the purposes of this podcast, Mike. Obviously, I could speak about it at even greater length. Yeah, the foundation is financial and economic. The foundation for that has to do with trust, with credibility, with legitimacy. And the foundation for that, in turn, is transparency and accountability. That's the essence of the thing. And the most successful movements are the most invisible. It's not the case that the squeaky wheel gets the grease.